Now that is a cool plant. Hey everyone, Erin from the Impatient Gardener. If you guys know anything about me by this point, you probably know that I am a plant enthusiast. I love to find cool plants that I can work into my garden in different ways. I love to experiment with plants and just have something that, you know, catches your eye in a different way that isn't what you see all the time. And today I'm going to show you some of those plants, and they're all from the Southern Living Plant Collection, which has partnered with me on this video. And this first one that we need to talk about is Fat Shedera Angiostar. Now, the first thing we need to just get right out there is that Fat Shedera is the most fun plant name to say. So you're going to be hearing it a lot. So Fat Shedera is actually an interspecies hybrid. It's a hybrid between English ivy and Fatsia. And so it brings in the best of both worlds. So that's why you have this plant right here that looks like it has giant ivy leaves on it, right? I mean, if you didn't have scale for this, you would think, oh, that's an ivy, except that the leaves are huge, like the size of my hand. So this plant brings that English ivy look, except totally on steroids, and twines up, although it needs to be supported. But the thing it doesn't do is get invasive and root all over the place, which in certain zones is exactly what English ivy does, and ivy can be a huge invasive issue. So no problems with that with this plant, but also it's just way cooler looking than any English ivy you might have ever seen. Now this Fat Shedera is going to grow like 5 or 6 feet tall and about 4 feet wide or so once it's mature. And it does have a very narrow hardiness zone. It's only hardy from zone 7B to zone 9. But never fear, because this can come inside, and that's what I'm going to do at the end of winter. So you can grow this indoors as a house plant, and like all of my house plants, it can come out in summer for a lovely vacation from the house, which is good for both the plants and the gardener. So I've been saving kind of a special spot for this plant, and I want to show you what that is. So this is the trough planter that I have right by the garage. This has always been a very shady area, interestingly enough, so I've planted this as a shade container. And by the way, that's what Fat Shedera would like. It would like part shade to shade. But since we took down the trees, it's interesting. It does get hit with a pretty big blast of sun at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, which I wasn't fully expecting. So far, everything's managing it fine, but we'll see how that goes. It makes it a little bit more complicated here. But I've already planted this up, but I have left a spot for Fat Shedera in here. So I'll just quickly show you what we have so far. We've just got a couple of salmon begonias. I used some silver helichrysum. There is a Rex begonia, a gray Rex begonia in there. And I would say, if anything, this Rex begonia is showing a little bit of sign of getting a little crispy. Hopefully that's just an adjustment thing. And then I've just got a couple of sweet potato vines that are red that will sort of hopefully intermingle. And then in the back, hidden down in here, I do have a brake fern, which is just a really cool plant. That's another sort of house planty kind of thing, which I think will get quite a bit larger. I think that will get actually quite big based on what I've seen about them. But I have saved a spot here for this Fat Shedera, which will look great on this wall. So I did place it leaning in a little bit because I didn't have a center spot exactly saved for it. So I think that'll be fine, you know, once it gets wider, that'll be fine. And then usually what I do is I usually just tie strings on this trellis for things to sort of twine around, and that's probably what I'll do here too. You can actually see last year's strings are still here. So as this grows, I will probably just sort of hook these, you know, sort of tuck those in there, and then it can take care of itself from there. However, if that doesn't work, I can always stick some bamboo stakes behind it. But let's take a look at the whole container here. I mean, what a fabulous bright light that is in this container. I can't wait to see it grow here. Okay, so that is the Fat Shedera. Now let's go take a look at some other very cool plants headed for other containers. So I'm very excited about this next plant because I've been talking about this plant for over a year now and writing about it in garden columns, because this thing won a whole bunch of awards and sort of took the garden world by storm when it was introduced. Now it's an All-America selection winner, and it is Waikiki Royal Hawaiian Colocasia. Now, Just came out of a box, shipped to me, so it looks a little rough. But imagine this thing with these. So this leaf is pretty good. It's just unfurling. So we get these sort of buttery yellow centers, and you're going to get these pink veins. And some of the leaves will turn a little pink on the inside, and I don't know if that's, I'm assuming that's as they age. We will see how it looks. Just a beautiful colocasia with these dark purple stems. Apparently one of the really great things about this one is that it colors up quite a bit quicker than a lot of other colocasias that have color in the middle of them. Of course, this colocasia is not remotely hardy here. It is hardy in zones 8 to 11, so if you are semi-tropical, you can enjoy growing this guy in the ground and have it come back every year. It will not do that for me. But never fear, I grow colocasias all the time. I overwinter them as best I can. Sometimes that works better than others. I will certainly try it with this one. But the fun thing about this is that I'm going to show you this in two very different container applications. One where it is the focal point, as you might expect, but another in which it's sort of a very, very, very cool accent piece. So this gets, 3 feet high and wide, they say, so certainly appropriate for, like I said, a sort of a centerpiece in a container, but an accent in a very large container, like the really big pot by my front door, which is where we're going to be putting this. So just a few care tips that are right here on the tag that I think are worthwhile passing along, because some people have told me that they really have a problem growing colocasia. So first of all, they're saying this one is sort of a part shade situation, although can go to full sun. So to me, what that tells me is full sun is just fine for me here in my zone 5 garden, but the further south you go and the hotter the sun is where you are, the more shade you're going to want to put that in. It wants well draining garden soil, but really rich in organic matter. And then the key thing with colocasias is just don't let them dry out. They just want regular water and they'll be good to go. Now, I have planted colocasias before in my pot, in a pot method. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm actually not going to do that in either one of these containers for 2 different reasons. But I think it's going to be just fine because it's growing with plants. For the most part, I'm going to sneak it with a couple of them that like those same conditions. So you might remember that this was the container that last year I grew the massive banana that we've been following the progress of in last year. That banana is too big for this container now. Last year, by the end of the year, it had eaten up most of the volume of soil, at least along the top, that was available in this container, not leaving a lot of room for other plants. So we're changing things up and we're going to put in the bird of paradise, which is the bird of paradise that I grew in the urn last year and overwintered, and it put on quite a bit of growth, and I think it's going to be very cool. So I'm going to do something quite different than what I've done here before. So normally I plant this up as like a 360-degree view container because you do sometimes see it when you're behind in the part of the garden behind it. But for the most part, this container is sort of at the entryway. It is viewed from where you are looking at right now. And because I'm putting in a couple of big plants in here, we need more room. So I'm actually going to put the bird of paradise at the back, centered in the back of the container. I actually put new potting soil in here in fall because once we took the banana out, there was no soil left in here. So in order to do my winter container and stuff, I had to put some soil in here. And then I did put just a little bit of compost blend in there just to add a little bit more organic matter to it, and a good amount of slow release fertilizer, which I put into all my containers. Okay, next up is our fabulous colocasia. And I am putting it on this side, even though symmetrically you would think it should go on the other side because of how this bird of paradise is growing. I don't think it's going to matter, and I really want it on this side so you can see it as you come in the driveway, because I think it's going to be a great showpiece. Oh my, look at those roots. This will make more sense to you why I'm tucking it in from the side once you see what's coming next. I do want to draw upon the yellow and pink that's gonna be in these leaves. So we're gonna stick with that, but I always like a little bit of blue/purple in containers too, so we're gonna add some of that as well. It's always difficult to tell what containers are gonna look like because of course you start with small plants that have no color on them. But so you gotta picture it in your mind's eye, but let me walk you through the plants we have here. So I started in the back corner because I felt like we're gonna need some height to counterbalance the Colocasia. Back here I did some Angelonia. I've got Angelonia all over the front part of the house this year, so I thought that would be a good through line to sort of match with what else is happening with the house. Now the other thing I'm planting everywhere this year is this plant. Now I've known this as Transcantia. Apparently it's now Secretia. I think it's one of those plants that's had a name change, but it's called Purple Heart. You probably know this plant. It does get quite big and bushy, very easy to nip out the bits that you don't want. So I added in 2 of those, one there, because that's going to give us some purple to sort of play off the stems of the Colocasia. Now, after that, I wanted to make sure that we brought in the colors that are going to accent the beautiful color of these leaves. So I brought in a light yellow petunia, and then I actually brought in some pink superbinas, which are not in color, but there's 2 of those that are lighter pink ones, or that start darker pink and fade to lighter pink, and then quite a bright one over there. And then I told you I wanted to bring in some purple here, so I threw in a purple petunia over here that should trail over the side, and then just to balance out all the purple that's going to come in with this Transcantia, I put in a sweet potato vine here in the back corner, which you'll see, trail out that way. So you'll see it from when you're looking at it from the front or that side. Obviously won't be a feature in front. And then lastly, I put in one of my favorite go-to plants is Muhlenbeckia wire vine, which looks like absolutely nothing right now, but adds in such a nice light texture, which clearly this planter needs. Oh, and speaking of light texture, I forgot one important bit, which is this papyrus grass right here. This is a shorter growing one. I felt like since we've got so much bold leaf form here that we needed something a little airier. Now, ideally, I would have found something like an asparagus fern or something like that to just add as a backdrop to all this. Couldn't find that. So we're going to go with this papyrus grass, which I think will be a nice texture contrast to the 2 big leaf plants that we have going on in this container. So that's what it looks like when you use Waikiki as sort of a very cool accent plant. Now let's take a look at what it looks like as the focal point in some containers. So this is the second way I'm using it in a container, which is as a very traditional centerpiece. And I'm going super simple. I've already planted the outside plants here. We're going super simple with bright hot pink verbena and yellow petunia, and we're just gonna put this in the middle. This is really gonna draw out those colors, but the star of the show here is definitely the Colocasia. Unfortunately, I forgot the leaf blower, but these are the 2 pots that flank the gate at the family cottage swimming pool. These are self-watering pots. They're very, very big pots, and they are not maintained much at all. And actually, I think the Colocasia will be just fine with that because the self-watering will keep it moist, and that's basically what it's going to need on a day-to-day basis. So with all self-watering containers, you have to water them in from the top for the first few waterings until that soil reservoir really has wicked up the water, and the roots have like a little bit of chance to get themselves going before they totally dry out. So just stay tuned on this one. I think these containers, I can't wait to show you these again in like a month because I have a feeling these are going to be really cool. So the last plant I want to talk to you about is just such a workhorse, and every time I work with the folks over at Southern Living Plant Collection, I ask them if I can have a few of these because I can always use more of these. This is Carex Everio, and it is just the most beautiful textured Carex. Now, the key thing that you should know about this is no matter where you are, now it is hardy in zone 5 to 9. But even if you're in those cooler zones like I am, this is not one you can push into the sun. I've tried, it doesn't work. In fact, these actually sat in the sun for one day and they're a little yet more yellow than they should be. They're really more of a very chartreuse limey green, kind of like you see more towards the bottom of the stems there. but this is really about texture. So 12 to 18 inches tall on this. So, and think shade, or at least part shade for these, but not blaring sun. Absolutely fabulous for shade containers. If you have a shade container, put one of these in there. It will brighten up a spot like you wouldn't believe. But I love this right along pathways. I think it's so beautiful. In fact, this is an excellent substitution for Hackloa All Gold if you have difficulty growing that plant. And because this doesn't need nearly, that plant is quite specific in what it wants, and this is a much more adaptable plant. So this is my favorite use for this, is to put this right on the edges of paths where it can just kind of float over and do its thing. It's got a much finer texture than Hackloa All Gold too, which makes it excellent to work into shade areas, because a lot of shade plants have really bold leaves because they need to, because there's not as much sun. So this works so well with those bolder textured shade plants. So these are definitely destined for, in my yard, for a path. But if you see this plant, you should pick it up. And if you don't see this plant, you should probably hunt it down, because it's just that practical and useful of a plant. And every time I have seen this in a container design, my eye goes straight to it, and invariably I say, what is that plant? And then I go, oh, it's Everrio. Like it's that good. So for containers or for in the ground, it just a plant that needs more love, because it's such a workhorse in the garden. By the way, this will be evergreen in most places. You kind of have to see, like in my zone, sometimes it's evergreen and sometimes it's not. So sometimes you have to cut it back because it's looking really shabby. Either way, you're going to get plenty of growth the next year, so it's no issue. Okay, so there are three very cool, very different plants that I have in my garden this year, and I'm excited to watch them grow. And I hope you're trying out some cool and different plants in your own garden this year. In fact, leave me a comment and let me know either which of these three that I featured today was your favorite, or what some of the cool plants that you're trying out for the first time this year are. All right, have a great day in your garden. We will see you soon.